Hello everyone, welcome. It is the day we have all been waiting for. It is the patch day. No more will we have to endure Jinx Lulu, or fingers crossed. I have read through the patch notes, so Lulu is definitely getting a nerf. In fact, you can see above my head the champions that are included in this week's patch changes. There are a lot of things that I'm really happy about. Some things that I'm thinking maybe they could have looked at, for instance, but I think we should go through them one by one and kind of talk through all of the big changes. If you like this type of content, I do patch reviews, I do tier lists, I do all that kind of good stuff. Hit the subscribe button, give me a like, and if this video gets over 500 likes, and you know, I'm using 500 as a random arbitrary number because it's the only one that I can think of, we'll make a Tryndamere video. Someone in the comments suggested it from one of my other videos. We're going to do it. If this video gets 500 likes, we'll make a Tryndamere video. I'm not playing Tryndamere in ranked. I don't want to kill my elo, but I will definitely play Tryndamere in a normal or in a smurf. So if this video gets 500 likes, Tryndamere is getting locked in. And I'm going to make a guide, and I'm going to be super happy about playing that champion. Okay, my question of the day, guys, is, before you even get into this patch notes, what are you hoping to see? What is the one thing that you're hoping to see that happens today, either buff or nerf or a combination of anything? Tell me what you're hoping to see, and if it comes true, let me know. Okay, right, let's talk about the patch changes. Oh, thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. There we go, said it. You guys understood what I said, right? Easy. Katarina, the Sinister Blade. She is being released this week. If you don't know about Katarina, she's a very old champion from League of Legends. She got a rework in the last couple of years. And she's now kind of like a very mobile assassin that has big team fight potential. Plus, Katarina got a change to Wild Rift, where in PC version, when you use her ultimate, you become stationary. In Wild Rift, you can slightly move around. It's really interesting. I'm going to obviously do a full guide on Katarina's release later on. We'll see what happens. Some new skins coming. Bilgewater Katarina, Deathsworn Katarina. Deathsworn Katarina looks cool as hell, by the way. The Omega Squad skins, Eltiga Braum, and Super Galaxy Shyvana, which I think is the best Shyvana skin. So if you haven't bought a Shyvana skin and you're a big Shyvana player, Super Galaxy Shyvana is a great one. We've got a Katarina challenge event, so that'll be coming at some point. Let's talk about changes, though. Champion changes. Okay. Ashe. Basically, she's getting a cooldown buff to her first ability. Do I think that this is going to make her a good champion? In the late game, potentially, but realistically, no. I think Ashe will remain where she is. I don't think this change is big enough to really shift her in the meta considerably. She's okay. She has her uses. She's a utility engage AD carry. She's not designed to be like high damage output. She's designed to control the pace of team fights and slow and, you know, whatever. So I don't think this is going to really make Ashe significantly better. This is the one that I was really interested in. Darius is getting a buff, but not just a little buff, a pretty significant buff. Darius is getting a buff to his Decimate Missing Health heal, and he's also getting a slow duration increase on his Apprehend, which is his third ability. When you pull in, they get a slight slow. So he's gonna. This is gonna make Darius like significantly more difficult to play against. And I think Darius was, I actually thought Darius was in an okay spot. Now, clearly, the balance team saw the stats and they can realize that he probably wasn't in as good of a spot that I thought he was in. But he's getting a buff. Missing health heal from his first ability and the slow duration on his pull. Darius, I think, actually might rise in the meta a little bit. And do I think he's going to be good, strong enough to dominate kind of like the Malphite, Olaf meta? Well, maybe. I mean, these are some good changes to Darius. Especially if you can pull someone in, having an extra half-second slow on them means you get more chances to land a basic attack, get an extra stack off, and potentially land your ultimate. Something else that's worth pointing out about Darius is that now in a 1v1, when he pulls you in, he gets 0.5 seconds extra to remaneuver and hit his Decimate. That's a big deal. Or, to give a bit extra time to land a basic attack, which you can follow up by using his second ability and then land a Decimate. So this actually makes his 1v1 potential much stronger, and I genuinely think this will put Darius a little bit higher up in the list. The good Darius players will really appreciate this change, and it is going to make Darius, I think, a pretty strong top laner. Or Baron laner, sorry. You guys know what I mean when I say top laner, right? Top lane, Baron lane, same terminology. Even though the map is mirrored sometimes. Ezreal has been pretty weak. Yes, he has. You guys absolutely nerfed the crap out of him. So they're reverting the nerf on Mystic Shot. That might be good enough to make, Ezreal a little bit more solid in the late game. He definitely lacked damage as it went on. I don't think, again, I don't know if this is going to make Ezreal super good. It's only 15 damage, only 15 base damage in the late game. It's not going to be a massive change. But it might help make him a little bit more viable, especially because there are some other changes that might shake up your character. Lulu. Yes, they are taking a larger swing at Lulu, and they're hoping to create more room for opponents when playing against her. Lulu's getting a 40 base health nerf. That's about, 8% of her base health that's dropping. Her movement speed is being dropped by 5, which you might not think is a lot, but movement speed is a big deal in this game. When you think about the fact that boots, I think, give you 20 base movement speed or something, like dropping a quarter of that just off the bat that's a pretty big movement speed drop. Her polymorph duration is being nerfed by 2.25 seconds at all ranks, which again is a relatively big deal. This is the biggest change though. Her shield duration. So when she shields someone, the duration is being cut in half. That is you. If you mistime your shield or you put it on too early, well, you're fecked. Because now it's basically saying if you want to be good at Lulu, you have to, be really, really good at getting the shield when it counts the most. And the cast range has dropped, and the ultimate wild growth cast range has dropped. And to put into perspective, 6 to 7, it's like, 12% nerf to the range, and a similar one to, there or thereabouts. It's basically, a little over 10% nerf on both the ranges of help picks and wild growth. That's the radius. Your circle's coming in by just over 10% on both of those abilities, which actually is a pretty big deal. Like, that's quite a long range. You now have to be closer to the person that you want to ult. These are some pretty huge nerfs to Lulu. Like, this might even be, I imagine in 2 weeks' time we're going to see them revert some changes or buff things back, because they didn't just chip at Lulu. They took a fecking sledgehammer and hit. Something that I've thought about retrospectively that is even worse about these Lulu changes is that the help picks range, not only is the shield duration decreased, so you've got to be much cleaner when you use it in lane, but actually now the cast range has decreased as well. And the polymorph duration being down means it's a double whammy assault to Lulu's offensive power in lane. No longer are you going to be able to, you have a 10% less range when walking up to enemies, or just over 10% less range when walking up to enemies and trying to cast help picks offensively, which puts you in the range of Janna. It puts you in the range of a lot of AD carries. It puts you in the range of Rakan and Alistair for engages as well. Like, this becomes much easier for these champions to engage on you. Also, as a big Alistair player, whenever I'm playing against the Lulu, I look for certain indicators when it is safe to engage. When I'm looking for an engage, I don't want the Lulu shield to be up, and I'm hoping that polymorph isn't up either, right? So I'm looking for these two big indicators that I can look for a headbutt polv combo, or, I can look for a Rakan grand entrance engage, for instance. I now have 2.5 seconds extra every time that she casts her shield to do that. So now I have much more opportunity or to look for an engage on a Lulu in lane, or a Lulu based lane matchup, and find a more aggressive punish. That is big. That is really big, and it means that some of the matchups that she was traditionally good into, she may now struggle to play into effectively. These are some big changes. Now, do I think that Lulu's not going to be playable? No. Because you still have the attack speed boost, she still works well with Ardent Sensor, and often in teamfights, if you're just shielding and boosting Jinx, she's still going to get her work done. So this is not really changing a huge amount. Like, a good Lulu probably will still be able to play Lulu Jinx, but what you're going to find is that the shield duration nerf is going to punish people who are not so practiced at Lulu. And everything else, like, she's squishier, she's slower. Like, these are some big changes. Like, Lulu is going to be much harder to play properly. Really, really, very much so. Much harder to play properly. However, Lulu Jinx will still work, but you just have to be much better at playing Lulu to make it work. Misfortune. Her baseline defenses and wave clear are a bit too high given her ranged profile when compared to other marksmen. So, they are nerfing her base armor, they're nerfing her base health regen, they're both nerfing her health regen at per level, and that is giving her a 7 HP per 5 reduction at level 15, which is a pretty big deal. Her love tap damage versus minions is 50%, so it's going to reduce the first hit that you do to minions by 50%. And love tap damage versus monsters is now 50%, so essentially that was a bug fix. So it's going to make last hitting, if you haven't hit the minion before, a little bit harder. And that just makes her wave clear a little bit, slower. Again, I think Miss Fortune's still a lane bully. I think she's still going to be good into the matchups that she's already good in. It's one of those situations, again, where you just have to be a little bit more careful about where you take trades. And I think it really depends on how bot lane meta shapes up. If we get, a rise of very, very heavy poke AD carries, like Ashe and Ezreal coming back in and they're just volleying and mystic shotting you, Miss Fortune's going to take more damage from that, and she's not going to recover as quickly. And so that's going to be, pretty significant. But again, I still think Miss Fortune's going to be decent. These are some nerfs, but they don't really affect the part of the kit that makes Miss Fortune strong. Miss Fortune's a lane bully. She's high damage output. Her double up is very, very good at, pressuring lane. And her wave clear, whilst it was pretty decent, I never thought was like the defining part of her kit. This, the very most, this might take Miss Fortune from like the S+ to the S, but, that really depends on how the bot lane meta shapes up. Olaf is getting nerfed. Yeah, okay, this is the guy that I complained about the most. Now, what I've noticed that Orianna hasn't been touched, but that's not so bad, and I'll talk about why in a minute. Olaf's been consistently overused as a champion who is supposed to take risks to deal damage, yes. We're toning down his utility and early game power to make him generally less powerful. His base armor is getting dropped by 5, which actually is a relatively big deal. His base AD is getting nerfed by just under 10%, so he's getting 6 AD removed from his base AD, which is going to make his early jungle clear slower and his early dueling worse. And his slow undertow has been dropped by 10% at pretty much all ranks, and the duration has been cut by a fifth to 2 seconds. So, Olaf's getting some pretty significant nerfs here. Now, obviously, undertow was always going to be a utility spell. Most people maxed his reckless swing first, which was his true damage. But obviously, he's now going to be a little bit easier to kill in the early game. And that's going to be especially important around the first dragon fight, where he would often take over the games relatively easily. He also is going to have a worse matchup into some of the other duelist junglers like Shyvana and Lee Sin. Speaking of which, Shyvana hasn't been touched. So Shyvana probably going to be one of the higher tier junglers. Something else that's worth noting about the Olaf changes is that with a lower base armor and a lower base AD, he's going to be slower clearing the jungle. And he's also going to, maybe slower. Okay, I'm going to add a caveat. Olaf's attack speed gets higher the less HP he has. With more lower base armor, he's going to take more damage in the jungle. He might actually end up clearing quicker because he gets that attack speed increase. But the base AD nerf would suggest that he maybe clears the jungle slower. And obviously with the base armor going down, he's going to take more damage. And that means he's going to be less healthy when he's either coming to contest the scuttle or if he gets invaded, which is a pretty big deal. And it might make Olaf's early game a lot weaker, especially from the jungle. Olaf will still be able to take over games if he gets rolling, but this is going to make his early dueling much worse. So those fights over the early Scuttle Crab are going to be harder for Olaf to win. So you're just going to have to be a bit more careful about the fights that you choose to take. But I think as the game goes on, as you get Triforce and you start to unlock a bit more defensive capabilities, he'll still be super, super good. His ultimate still has its use, right? Heavy CC meta, Olaf's always going to be a solid choice. Varus. Piercing arrow cooldown is coming down. Do I think that makes him good? No. No, it doesn't. I mean, I think Varus was already like okay, not as good as some of the other AD carries. I'll look at this with bated breath. Generally, piercing arrow favors a lethality Varus build. So lethality Varus, you just poke with the Q, but that's never seemed to come to fruition in Wild Rift. There isn't enough good lethality items to choose from Varus. So I don't know if this is actually going to make him any better. We'll see. I don't think so. This is dangerous. They're buffing Vayne. They're increasing the damage that Condemn does when you connect with terrain by 30 in the early ranks and then 15 in the later ranks. And her ultimate final hour ultimate cooldown is coming down in the early game. Don't know if this is enough to make Vayne good in the early game. I still think Vayne's going to have a terrible laning phase. But, if you land that Condemn in the Dragon fight, that's 30 extra damage. That can often be the difference between life and death. I don't think it's going to make her super strong. I think one of the problems And I think also one of the big things that they've noted here is that there are some Blade of the Ruined King changes, and obviously Vayne is one of the biggest Blade of the Ruined King users in the game. So I think with the Blade of the Ruined King balance changes, I don't think Vayne's going to suddenly pop off and become incredibly good. I think she's still going to be relatively weak and played by very niche AD carry players, especially with the Lulu changes as well. That Lulu was like Vayne's best AD carry at support. So I think Vayne probably not going to be super good. Here we go, though. Here we go. Xayah. Bam. Every single ability has had a buff. Okay, so double dagger base damage has been increased by a small amount in the early game and then not much in the late game. So her early game poke with double dagger is going to be good. Not a huge change, but decent. It's nice. Deadly Plumage, the bonus attack speed, which is also going to affect Rakan, by the way, if you play Xayah Rakan. You get a 10% attack speed increase at all ranks, which is huge. 10% attack speed is a big deal. That's a lot of attack speed, especially in the late game. Blade Caller, the ability cooldown is coming down, and they're increasing the AD ratio. Notably, it does not scale with critical strike still, but it is a 0.2 AD ratio increase, which is going to significantly increase the damage of this ability, which is what I think Xayah was sorely lacking, because she used to scale with crit on the PC with this ability. Doesn't on Wild Rift, but they're just going to increase the AD ratio. That might actually make up for it. And then Featherstorm base damage is coming up, and especially in the late game, 75 damage, which is a pretty big deal. I think this makes Xayah potentially S tier. These buffs, there are a lot of buffs on every ability. I think this potentially makes Xayah S tier, and as such, that makes Rakan better as well, because Xayah and Rakan naturally work together really well as a lane. Guarantee you, me and Stu, once this patch comes out, we're playing some Xayah Rakan. I think this makes Xayah potentially S or even S plus tier, especially with the nerfs to Misfortune. Kai'Sa unchanged. Jinx unchanged, but with the Lulu nerfs, that makes Jinx slightly weaker. Kai'Sa probably remains as one of the best AD carries in the game. But I think this makes Xayah super good. So I'm excited about these Xayah changes. They potentially make her too good. I think we're going to have to see. There's a lot of buffs, a lot of big buffs to Xayah here, but we'll see how they work out. And also, Xayah was not a Blade of the Ruined King abuser. And a lot of the carries that use Blade of the Ruined King right now, Jinx, well, I suppose Kai'Sa as well, even Misfortune and Vayne, like every AD carry was using Blade of the Ruined King. It was not something that worked particularly well with Xayah's kit because she has a lot of AD scaling. Blade of the Ruined King is getting nerfed. And, you know, it should be, because it's a dumb item. You should not be building this on every single AD carry in existence. Okay, so the attack damage is coming down by a third. So you're reducing the attack damage down by a third, but you're raising the attack speed slightly. So attack speed based AD carries, Kai'Sa and Vayne, you're going to have less attack damage, but obviously these carries that have like the passives to proc or the silver bolts will get a little bit of benefit out of the attack speed increase. The drain movement speed duration has been nerfed by a third, so you will not get the movement speed for as long. And they're buffing the 9% of enemy current health proc for melee champions only. So it's 6% to 9% for melee champions. It remains at 6% for AD carries and range champions. This is a pretty significant nerf because like 10 AD is a big deal, especially in the early game. I still think this is going to be a core item for the likes of Vayne and Xayah. There just isn't another item to really. It's not Xayah, Kai'Sa. I always get Kai'Sa and Xayah mixed up. Kai'Sa and Vayne because there aren't many other items that do what Blade of the Ruined King does for them. But like Misfortune might be better off avoiding this item now. Misfortune benefits from flat AD. Jinx, who goes Runan's Hurricane, may still build Blade of the Ruined King, but like Misfortune, probably not. Xayah, definitely not. Ashe, probably, because you have your volley, which is obviously important. But yeah, I think realistically, this will shift this item away from the meta, especially for every AD carry right now. So we might see less people building Blade of the Ruined King, especially those that rely on AD scalings. We might not see Misfortune build it. I don't think we're going to see Xayah build this. It might fall out of Jinx's kit, and Jinx might be better off just going for something like Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, Runan's Hurricane, or Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge, Runan's Hurricane. And just skipping the Blade of the Ruined King entirely and maybe going for a Bloodthirster later on. One of the big problems that we have for AD carries right now is that, apart from the boots, there's not many other good sources of lifesteal. And so that's one of the things that Blade of the Ruined King did do. It offered that lifesteal source. So it might just be that the lifesteal is too important. But obviously because people are building Mortal Reminder pretty early on now, people are starting to counteract that lifesteal meta. We'll see. And something that I have just thought of, right at the end here, and I'm going to add this in. This is probably going to be edited. I had a couple of extra thoughts that I've edited into this video, which is why you might see some weird jumps when I'm in the middle of conversation. Blade of the Ruined King, and this is something that my friend Stuart mentioned to me, and he's like big brain about this because he's an AD carry main. The Blade of the Ruined King AD nerf means that Kai'Sa, who builds Blade of the Ruined King into BF Sword to get her first ability upgrade, can no longer get her first ability upgrade from Blade of the Ruined King into BF Sword. Now you need to go Blade of the Ruined King into Infinity Edge, and that delays your third ability upgrade. So even though Kai'Sa hasn't been changed, and even though the attack speed does benefit Kai'Sa in terms of proccing her passive, that is a big nerf to Kai'Sa because it delays your first ability upgrade, and delaying her ability upgrades delays her power spikes, and it's going to make her harder to play in the mid game. Those are some pretty significant changes to Kai'Sa in that respect. And I didn't even think about it until Stuart mentioned it to me. But that's insane. Honestly, that's a big that you know, I think Xayah might maybe just be the best AD carry in, you know, in the meta. Because I think, you know, Kai'Sa's getting unintentionally nerfed, and I didn't think about it until Stuart mentioned it to me. Miss Fortune's getting a slight nerf. Jinx Lulu's getting nerfed. You know, like, there are a lot of big nerfs to some of the more prominent AD carries right now. And this is going to shake up the bot lane meta pretty significantly. It's going to be insane. One final thing that I want to say about Blade of the Ruined King is clearly some melee users are going to get benefit out of this. Now, there are not actually a huge amount of melee users in the meta that really take a huge draw from Blade of the Ruined King, but I'll tell you one that does, that is already pretty strong. And it's just a little nod to an already strong jungler who I think may become even stronger, because there is no Mastermind rune nerfs, which I'm a little bit annoyed about. I thought Mastermind probably needed a nerf. In fact, I was really hoping that Mastermind would get a nerf, but, you know, it is what it is. Maybe down the line. Shyvana. Shyvana generally goes Triforce into the Blade of the Ruined King. Blade of the Ruined King has now had essentially a melee buff, and Shyvana is already pretty strong. With the Olaf nerfs, I'm expecting Shyvana to be super high priority on the upcoming patch. So all you Shyvana one-tricks and you Shyvana users, I think you're actually going to have a really good patch. I do think Shyvana is going to be super good. And here we go. Liandry's Torment, and subsequently Haunting Guise, which is the item that builds into Liandry's Torment. This item was, you know this item was broken when almost every mage, even Akali, was building it first item every single game. They are nerfing the ability power by 20, and for context, a single amplifying tome, the 500 gold investment, gives you 25 ability power. So they are essentially nerfing a 400 gold value from the item. They're making the item cost the same, but they're making it easier to pick up Haunting Guise, but they're going to make it slightly more expensive to combine everything together for Liandry's Torment. But the overall cost is the same. And again, I think this was the necessary change. I don't think Liandry's Torment should have given the same amount of ability power as some of the other AP items in the meta, and also give you the 10% damage stack buff, and also give you the burn damage. It was too strong. It was just too strong. So they're basically nerfing 400 gold of value off the item, and just taking some ability power away from it. So if you're looking for more burst power in the early game, you know, Liandry's Torment might not be the item for you. Liandry's Torment was always supposed to be an item that you picked up to build against high HP tanks. It was not supposed to be an item that was built every single game, all the time as first item, regardless of who you're playing into. And this is why the Orianna changes I'm not so bothered about, because Orianna, I think, excelled with the use of Liandry's Torment. So I think this is going to just bring the respective power level down of some of those mid laners that... Oh my god, my headset fell off. Some of those mid laners that really abused the Liandry's Torment spike. Aurelion Sol will also get subsequently hit a little bit by this. Any of the mid laners that would use Liandry's Torment as a very early item are going to feel the pain. Do I think this is going to mean Liandry's won't get built? No, because the 10% damage bonus, especially in the late game, is really strong. But it just might not be first item every single game, which is good because that's unhealthy. If every single mage is building first item every single game, you know, that is relatively unhealthy. And 20 ability power is relatively significant, you know, relatively so. So I think these are good changes. I'm really happy with the majority of the patch. My question of the day, actually, I'm gonna edit this into the start. So if you got this far and you saw the question of the day earlier, it's because I forgot to ask the question of the day earlier, and we're just gonna edit it in. So if it clips to me asking a random question of the day, you know why. If you enjoyed the content, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.